70s rock drummer to youth group
I
starter.
tell the teenagers, if you don't get this part right, if you don't live for God, live to go to heaven, all of our court programs won't make a darn bit of
I think
difference.
it's not only like crazy blue-haired people who get offended really easily.
Yeah.
'70s rock drummer to youth group starter.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, actually, you're almost spot on. It was big '80s rock drummer.
Mm.
So, but thank you though. It's great to have this conversation. So, yeah, back in the big '80s, which was a great time for music, actually.
Oh yeah, best decade for music.
It really, it's one right up there. So I was just a young guy, and I had a group, and we won the Rock Wars Grand Championship. We had a record deal. We were even on MTV in the very early days of MTV.
Back when there was music on it?
Yeah, absolutely. We went to CD before a lot of major acts did. The band was called the Bellows, and it was out of Columbus, Ohio. And it was just a great run for a few years. And what's interesting about that, it was during that time that I met my wife. And so, we've been married 36 years,
Okay.
2 great kids, grandchild. And so because of that, I consider myself the most successful rock drummer in history.
Probably.
In history, yeah. And so, we had a great run. We had, in your 20s, and all of a sudden you pull up to a place in your 20s and you see a line of people around the place. We were the featured band. Columbus, Ohio has a great fireworks thing called Red, White, and Boom every 4th of July. We were the headliners for that one year, 70,000 people. And when you're in your 20s, that's a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And some handle it better than others, So I was a full-time rock and roller in the big '80s, but my degree was actually in social work from Ohio State. And so I was an inner city social worker. And then, the rock and roll career kind of took off. And I left rock and roll after a number of years to go back to doing traditional Irish music, which I play to this day. So that's my musical life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so was your wife at a concert? Was she like also doing band stuff? Or?
Well, actually, it's neat. Our families were both in the Irish community of Columbus, Ohio, for a couple generations at that time, maybe 3. So our families knew each other. The Cotters were a very well-loved family, going back to my grandfather and my dad and the 7 Cotter boys and my 2 aunts, and they were always given the first card in the St. Patrick's Day parade, and had one uncle who was a famous entertainer. So they were loved. And then my wife is a Byrne, and so they're about a half generation younger than the Cotters, but her brother, her dad, they were all presidents of the Shamrock Club, the official leprechaun in the parade. I mean, they are a big deal.
Yeah.
And so we knew each other through the Irish community.
Okay.
So then it was once during my Bellows days, Katie came into a club with a friend of hers just to hear us play. And the weekend, so we kind of knew each other basically because of the families involved in the Irish community. But that kind of sparked the relationship. And so from there, the rest is kind of history. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so were you raised Catholic then, I presume?
I was, yeah.
Okay.
Now, my mother was never Catholic. She was Methodist.
Okay.
Actually, her side of the family were, the men in the family were Shriners, Freemasons. Yeah, and my mother was very, very loved. She was her, like the high school queen. She was Miss Kenton, Ohio, in 1936. Very loved young lady. But she came into Columbus. It was during World War II time, and there she met my dad. So my dad's side was the Irish Catholic side. My mom's side was the Protestant Freemason side. And at that time, it was such a big deal when my mom married my dad that my mom's dad didn't even attend the wedding. Thank God, years later, there was nothing but love between both sides, and actually built bridges, tore down some barricades maybe. So we were raised Catholic, the kids.
Yeah.
And Mom had no problem with that. She was a beautiful singer and sang in her Methodist church on Sundays. We went to Mass with Dad. And I can say they were married for over 45 years. And there was never once a religious argument in our home,
that's
ever.
Nice. That's good.
And both freely practiced their faith. And so that was, that's fortunate. And being of Irish background, that's kind of unique because you didn't get a lot of that in Ireland for a long time. There's still polarization, but
very much.
Some gains are being made still. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I have found it in what you just said seems to indicate it that if an interdenominational marriage happens, it goes much more smoothly if the man is Catholic.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
I think there were some studies done a few years ago, and the study may have been done by a Protestant minister or who started it, and basically said, the odds in today of a kid staying Catholic, if both of his parents practice, it's about 50-50. If the mom goes to church and the dad doesn't, it goes down to like 5% chance. If the dad practices and the mom doesn't, it's like 40% chance. So it's just the role of a father is big, and it should never be discounted. But I remember Dad every night of his life kneeling by the side of his bed to say his prayers before he got into bed, and that passed on to me. Even if I'm super tired, and I forget, I have to sling myself down on the floor, do it real quick and get back. But there, and also a great practice Dad did. Little visits, like if we were driving around someplace. At that time, churches were open most of the time because it was safe. Just to stop in for a few minutes. My grandfather did that. That was a practice and I tried to do that with my kids. I did when they were growing up. So yeah, we had a happy Catholic interdenominational home, but like our Catholic life was the most were predominant. That was we were active in it. As an older boy, Mom would come see me serve Mass a couple times. So that was good.
That is good. So, if I may ask, did you keep practicing and such while you were doing in the band singing in the 80s?
I did. I got to say, I had my share of sins, as we all do. But I will say, and it's a story I've told frequently. When I was 5 years old. I don't want you to think, wow, if he's starting at 5, we're gonna be here a while. He's in his 60s now. When I was 5, my dad had a connection to Santa Claus, and so for Christmas, I got a little set of plastic, the Mark's Toy Company, of Jesus and the Apostles, and I loved them. I still have them, and Dad would tell me simple stories of the saints. And I remember taking one out, and it was like, oh, this is John. He may have been a teenager when he was an apostle. This is Matthew. People didn't like him. He was a tax collector, but Jesus did and had a job for him to do. And this is Peter, our first pope. And this is Andrew, patron saint of Scotland. They're almost like the Irish. And but there are all these stories, and I've told this many, many times. So anyone who's seen me on other podcasts, it's like, oh, here we go again, because it's a true story. There's no deviation. So so I knew at an early age that these were the guys to be like. That's the standard. And I have to say, that standard never left me in life. Now, so I remained a practicing Catholic forever. During college, when I would get approached by evangelical college dudes and would try to sit down and start a conversation, then find out I was Catholic and try to throw some zingers. Whenever there was a zinger, I would just call a priest friend of mine to get the answer, and I was fine. So in my pursuit of the truth, anytime there was a question during kind of formative young years, there was never once I was left feeling empty or that was incomplete. So that kind of bolstered the faith. And then during my rock and roll days, I had a bad temper. I think that's from being redhead Irish DNA. It's an accident of birth. It's not my fault. And I had some of that stuff going. And I think sometimes in the rock and roll thing, you can become a little bit self-centered, But as far as always went to Mass, never missed. Stayed involved in the sacramental life. Took a pledge never to drink, and that was, you know, kind of a good call, I think, during those years. So
Yeah.
so life was it was good, you know, and so I was able to maintain those values and kept them, you know, and so I'm grateful for that, really.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I'm like better than other people,
Uh-huh.
but I'm just really grateful that I think it spared a lot of heartache and the fact that I kind of kept the faith. That I did
Yeah.
keep the faith through those times. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Were like the rest of your bandmates other denominations, or were they Catholic, or were they?
they were non-practicing mix.
Okay.
Yeah, there were a couple. One was a kind of a former Catholic, didn't, you know, had stopped practicing.
Hmm.
You know, a couple of other guys. No, there was not a faith life involved. We were a band of brothers, I have to say, you know, and, you know, we've talked about getting together someday and recording another album and stuff like that. So, like, the love is there as a band of brothers, but our lives are very different. But
Yeah.
there's a great bond between us. You know, we love each other,
Yeah.
but our faith lives are very different.
Okay. And then, so you're in your 20s. Did you already go to college, or did you go to
Oh,
college
let me
later?
think. I went to Ohio State
Okay.
for college. I wanted to go to some smaller colleges and play basketball. I did
Okay.
pretty well in basketball in high school, and had some opportunities to go to some kind of small colleges and play.
Hmm.
But I went to Ohio State, big school, and I didn't have the skills as a guard. You know, I was a tall guy in high school, but short guy in college. Um, so when I knew basketball was going to be where, I had one professional basketball tryout to play in Europe, in Ireland.
Wow.
But I couldn't get by the cut. They were taking one American on each team,
Yeah.
and I couldn't get, the American players were just too good. So on the way home, on the train on the way home, I thought, what am I going to do now? Oh, I'll play drums because I love drums.
Yeah.
So I left the kind of the sporting world, and did the music thing and played in Irish and Scottish bagpipe bands, the Bellows, my rock and roll career, traditional Irish music, which I still play. So that was great. So
Yeah.
I've kept that going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You asked me a question there, and I think I rambled to the point where I missed your question.
Well, I guess so. So you did the band stuff whilst in college, then,
Oh yeah,
or
it was
did
right
you?
after college.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a
Okay.
social worker by degree, and I
Okay.
went to work in inner city stuff. A lot of inner cities. Worked for Catholic Social Services, an
Okay.
intake worker. Really worked kind of in like the streets of Columbus as a social worker, and it
Okay.
was out of that era that all of a sudden the band thing kind of caught on and took off.
Okay.
And so I kind of left the social work world.
Okay.
Also became a juvenile court director for
Okay.
a county in Ohio when I was in my 30s.
Okay.
Um,
What does that entail?
Basically, after the judge, I was like kind of like the most powerful guy in town. Yeah, so yeah, as I was in charge of the juvenile court, if there were teens that got in trouble,
Hmm.
they would come to me. I would interview them and kind of come up with what I think should happen to them.
Okay.
And then in the court, in the hearing, like, then I would talk to the judge and make a recommendation what to do with them.
Okay.
And about 99% of the time, the judge said, okay. So, you know, if I said this teen needs probation, this teen needs community service, this one needs to go to a bigger lockup facility for a longer time. I mean, those were kind of my recommendations to the court. So, yeah, that was that juvenile court work. It was very good work.
Yeah.
But I will say during that time, I started to realize more and more what teenagers, what I believe they needed most,
Mm.
um, is not a court system, but they need the love of God and the grace of God working in their life. And I remember as a court worker, sometimes I would take teens to a lockup facility, and we'd go by the shrine of Our Lady of Consolation in the town of Cary, Ohio. My aunt was cured of blindness through the intercession of Our Lady in Cary in the 1930s. So my grandfather always had a great devotion to her and made a pledge to go there and visit every year for the rest of his life, which he did.
Yeah.
So I was familiar with Cary, and I would take, sometimes teens would be in my lockup vehicle, and I'd stop at the church, take the cuffs off of him, tell him, please don't run. He made me look bad. I'll lose my job. But I would try to tell the teenagers, if you don't get this part right, if you don't live for God, live to go to heaven, all of our court programs won't make a darn bit of difference. Nothing. And then I would say, I may never see you again, but you know, it's time to go, and put the cuffs back on, put them in the car, and we go. And so thankfully, none of them ever ran off on me. So I'm always grateful.
That
But
would have been a quick end to the story.
you're not kidding. So I've worked with teenagers then since I was one, and it was during the juvenile court work was very, very busy work. But I'm sorry about that.
Oh, you're fine.
Modern technology. Okay, so I'll turn this sound thing off here too. Okay, so so I kept the faith through it all. I will say, through social work, the band life, juvenile court thing, but really I felt a very strong call to work for the church, and that work took me down to Florida, where I was hired to work at a parish.
Okay.
An Irish priest. I was visiting Florida with a friend. An Irish priest saw me outside the church going to mass, and he said, "Hey, you're a big fella. I think you look like you could handle teenagers. Do you want a job working for the church?" And I thought, well, that's pretty quick, So I said, well, yeah. So because I'd been praying when I'd go to the shrine in Cary, I'd say, Lord, put me in a place where I can advocate for the rest of my life what I know young people need the most. It's you, Lord. It's a faith. So when that call came to go down to Florida, and that was quick, and so I accepted it, and we moved to Florida, and there I worked with. There were teens from like 10 different subcultures, teenagers, goths, and the country crowd, and the preps, and the jocks, and you name it, all these different subcultures. Even the Satanist crowd. There's a lot of different teams from subcultures. But I loved working with them, trying to lead them towards the faith. And so that's the kind of work now I've done for my life. And it was there in Florida, one night we watched with a group of teenagers, watched this film that was relatively new at the time called Dead Poets Society.
Yeah.
It started a great conversation afterwards. Wow, let's learn about the lives of saints. They're only dead by the world's definition. Oh, St. Paul says in the Bible, be dead to sin, alive in Christ. So our logo, dead to the world, alive in Christ. Let's learn about the lives of saints and pray for souls in purgatory. And that idea has stuck now for over 27 years. It's to where my life's work now has become as a founder and director of Dead Theologians Society, an apostolate for young people and young adults to learn about the lives of saints and pray for souls in purgatory. And we've been over 20,000 members in about 42 parishes and 42 states. 550 parishes. So that's been kind of the road to get me to where I am now.
Okay, so you start this, I guess, youth group program type of thing, and then takes off, and now you're back here. Are you still working at parishes, or do you?
Yeah, I do actually have the assistant youth director at St. Patrick's Parish in downtown Columbus, where we have 6 generations of family, all the way from the Irish immigrants. That's the old Irish Mother Church there in downtown. So here I am, full circle. My wife and I had our first date at St. Patrick's Church in Columbus.
Wonderful.
We were married there, so I'm the assistant youth director there. And often I'll set up for adoration, because we have Eucharistic adoration and confession available for the teenagers at every youth group at St. Patrick's, every time we get together, which is beautiful. And often I'll set up for adoration, and I'm praying in the church by myself and look over and think, wow, so much of my life has been connected to St. Patrick's. In the blink of an eye, my casket will be right here, as my send-off spot. There's no other place I'd probably rather be. Now, I will say, we did move after the idea for DTS, Dead Theologians Society, in Florida, got a call to move to Ohio from an old priest friend of mine. They needed a youth minister, so that happened. Moved to the Diocese of Columbus, started this idea with a coworker. And then all of a sudden that caught on. The first group, 11 teenagers, and there were 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. It just kept growing. This idea of Dead Theologians Society, meeting at the church to pray for souls, learn about the saints, pray for souls in purgatory. So you'd have the church triumphant, the saints that we're learning about, and we, the church militant, fighting the good fight, asking for the intercession of the church triumphant and praying for the souls, the church suffering in purgatory. So it was a fantastic way to have the whole family together. We just thought it was exciting. And so that kept catching on. After a number of years then, there was a bishop in Wisconsin at the time. Now he's Cardinal Raymond Burke. He heard about what we were doing. He had one of his youth directors come out and visit us, and we went out there and we told him everything that we were doing. We said, Bishop Burke at the time, if there's anything we're doing wrong, please tell us, because we have this kind of format, with our opening prayers and our Life of Saint, intercessory prayer, these little segments of Dead Theologians Society. If we're doing anything wrong, please let us know and we'll change it, because our desire is to do everything that's right.
Right.
But sometimes a kid can accidentally color outside the lines and give you a nice picture. You can say, well, that's beautiful, but you're outside the lines here. So we are open to that. He said, no, this is great. And don't change the name. It's a great hook. You're going to catch a lot of fish with that hook.
Yeah.
So when they called, and then I was offered, would you come to Wisconsin to set up this program? Because they had just lowered the age of confirmation down to grade school, younger. And then Bishop Burke said, this could be a great program to keep the teenagers interested in growing in the faith post-confirmation. Because unfortunately, it's the reality, a lot of kids, they get confirmed and maybe you see them at wedding time,
right?
Which is a tragedy all the way around. But part of the appeal of Dead Theologians Society was for something like that after they lowered the age of confirmation. So moved to Wisconsin, and there started the work. And it's just grown and grown since then. We're anchored to this day in the Diocese of Madison, Wisconsin. There was a great bishop, Bishop Robert Morlino, who's now deceased, and he loved what we were doing with Dead Theologians Society. And we were always very transparent. We said, hey, we're onto something here, but we want to do what's right. We never thought we were the answer to all the problems of youth ministry, because we're not. But we're one of them. We're one of the bullets. I mean, not the magic bullet, but it's definitely helping a lot of people, a lot of souls, with vocations, marriage, holy lives, change of career, what young people want to do with their lives. So the word is spread. We've never had a huge marketing budget or anything, but word is spread. I'm delighted there's a chapter of DTS here at St. Vincent de Paul.
Yeah, I'd actually never heard of it before coming here, but I heard about it and looked through it, and I'll be honest, first time I looked through it, I was like, doesn't really seem like much, just looking at this, reading about a couple of saints and having some food. I mean, like, the saints are great. I love the saints. I hope to hang out with them one day in heaven. But it's not what struck me as a youth group. But then they were like, oh no, we actually have a lot of kids coming, and then I looked into it, and I found out about you, and I'm like, wow, this has been super successful.
Yeah, it really has.
Yeah,
I mean, the figure. Yeah, we're over to 20,000. I get invited to weddings and ordinations and hear about it all the time from young people they were in DTS. Then we had a little parish out in Missouri, St. Joseph, Missouri, and there were 3 teenage boys. This would have been, almost 20 years ago now. All 3 of them, they're at DTS learning about the lives of saints, and they are all good friends. And they said, hey, let's all become priests. And they are now. And I've heard that story over and over again. We get new chapters, applications to have a chapter in DTS, and I'll ask, how'd you hear about it? And the priest will say, I was in DTS when I was a teenager. I mean, this happens all the time.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good indicator. And the program was set up not to be a fad. It's not about Eddie Cotter. Teens don't even know who I am. That's fine. I mean, a few do. My own kids knew who I was.
I hope so.
Yeah. So it's so I like that. It's not based on any celebrity. I mean, we present the treasures of the faith. We don't put our own spin really on anything. It's really just like setting up a menu of great stuff. And we found that the kind of the recipe, if it's followed, it's just like the right amount. It kind of flows nicely. I think sometimes, St. Don Bosco talked about it. There are 2 errors that can happen in youth ministry. One, if it's all religion, no social, or if it's all social and no religion. Unfortunately, I think we've had, in my lifetime, more of just the social thing with the little dabble of religion. It's like, that's not...
And it's not something substantial. It's like, oh, hey, here's like the most foundational, basic thing that even people who aren't Catholic know about our church.
Yes.
But then they don't go into it. They're just like, oh, well, yeah, we have the Pope. He's the head of the church. We believe that the first one was St. Peter. Let's have some pizza. And you're like, wait, we all knew this.
Yeah.
Even the Protestants know this.
Yes. And I think there's a lot of well-meaning people to get in youth ministry, but I think the model has been lacking. It's been so diluted because I think there's been a fear sometimes and a concern of, let's say if a youth minister is older than teenagers, and teenagers can be intimidating. They're powerful, very powerful group. But I think sometimes adults are thinking, I got to keep them happy and fed because I'm terrified if they turn on me. And so there's a kind of a bailout, and there's a fear if I give them too much religion, they're going to walk on me, and then I'm not going to have a job because one or two kids will be coming to youth group, and what am I? And so I think there's an internal fear that happens.
Yeah.
When we started Dead Theologians Society, first we read the Didache, the Teaching of the 12 Apostles, and it was amazing the language, how it was so relevant to today, and it blew their minds.
Yeah.
So each time we would read about a saint and some of the quotes and how they lived and how they died, what they stood for, how they witnessed the faith. It's like, wow. And the fact that it's real. I think teenagers thinking, this gives me hope. This gives me someone to emulate. This makes my confirmation saint a lot more important to me. This makes what I want to do with my life maybe like them. Because here we are, sometimes 500,000, 1,500 years, 2,000 years later, we're learning about this poor person. And I think a lot of sometimes the old saying would be, I want to live longer than myself, meaning some kind of legacy, That's why I got my rock CD still. So long after I'm gone, they'll still play the bellows.
They'll still be there.
Yeah, exactly. So I think by passing on the faith, wow, you talk about something that's important. I learned early in life, they said, no matter what you do, sometimes it's going to be really hard. But at the end of the night, can you still sing the company song? And there's a lot of things that I could have gone into that at the end of the day, I don't want to sing the company song,
Yeah.
The church though, the faith, there's by comparison, there's nothing else that, for myself that matters that much, And I have a very wonderful life with, the music and coach basketball. And so all this stuff, but all of it under our umbrella in youth ministry, whether it's Dead Theologians Society or the parish at St. Patrick's, it's all about, we're all in this to know and love and serve God more, learn our faith because of the richness, the treasures, which will help us love God more. And the hope and the anticipation after this brief earthly life is over, to have heaven for eternity. So everything, even when we pray before a basketball game, we know that we're not just going through emotion. That and we would say as a team, this is the most important part of the game today, guys. We have our training, basketball trainings. We pray for souls in purgatory, the St. Gertrude prayer. And it's like, this is the most important thing we're going to do during these 2 hours of basketball training.
Yeah.
And I think so, knowing that, it just keeps the perspective right, the focus right, and gives meaning to everything we do. So that's I'm grateful in life to all the people I've met along the way, and the grace of God and the sacramental grace, and the good teachers I've had, and even learned things from the bad people in life, what not to be like. That has kind of put me in this place where there's kind of like an inner peace. I'm not the person I want to be yet, but I'm sure happy and grateful, I should say, that I've been able to do this work. Because there are very many holy people, far holier than I am, that because of life circumstances may work a grueling job somewhere, and they still come back afterwards and volunteer at their parish and teach CCD, and they do those kind of things.
Yeah.
I really respect those kind of folks, because I've been very fortunate that I get to do this for my life's work.
Right. I feel similarly. My entire job here is just talking about the most important thing in life, which is the most important thing to me.
Yeah.
Someone came to me and said, hey, the stuff that you do on a regular basis, which is badly, but to some degree of competency, I hope.
Yeah.
Talk about the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
What can we just pay you to do that? No. I'm like, well, sure.
So that's super lottery win.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's someone said a long time ago to me, it was actually a Protestant minister friend of mine. He said, very few people in the world get to do this full time.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's so basically the idea was like, don't think you're better than other people. Be extremely grateful, because
absolutely.
What a privilege to be able to do that and eke out a living.
Exactly. There's some people who have a podcast or try to write things or have a blog or something, and I know there's probably at least 100, much more learned, much more holy than I am.
Yes.
But for some reason, I get to do this job.
Jacob, I think that's the right posture for us to maintain in life. St. Patrick is a hero of mine since I was a little boy. Same. And I love the fact when he said, I'm Patrick, a sinner, the least of all the faithful and utterly despised by many. And it's like, I get it. And so I think, and I've gotten to meet a lot of brilliant Catholic theologian and political guys. I mean, that just really have the gift.
Yeah.
I've never been, I would say, academically gifted like that. I'm kind of a choppy talker, as anyone that watches this will see. And so I really respect that kind of talent, very much so. But man, to be able to do this. Moses, I remember, I've never ever wanted to be a big room speaker. It is not me. I'm more comfortable in the trenches. But I remember a few times when I've been called upon to give a bigger talk or to do something for there's a TV show or podcast or something, WTN a few times. And I remember once seeing in the Bible, people say kind of Bible roulette. I went with E for Eddie. So I went to Exodus, and then I went with my birth date. I think it was I think Exodus 4:12, if I remember this right. And basically Moses, who had a stuttering problem, who wasn't a good speaker, and God said, just open your mouth. I'll tell you what to say, and I'll put the words in your mouth.
Yeah.
And that gave me a courage to. Sorry, just bumped the mic. That gave me a courage to say, Eddie, if you're in it for vanity and to try to be the next hottest celeb, you're going about this wrong.
Yeah.
So in my choppiness, in my lack of being degreed, I'm even more grateful.
Yeah.
Really, and that's really genuine. Yeah. So, and it just goes to show here, I don't have a master's degree in theology or even a bachelor's or a PhD, and I know that.
But I don't have a degree at all, so you're fine.
Well, I feel a lot better now. I thought you were a professor. But I think that, and I respect people that have that. I mean, I'm not saying, in no way am I putting that down.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm just saying that God can take a guy from the west side of Columbus, and without the degrees, but whereas St. Patrick was so filled with gratitude, the fact that he lost a lot of his learning opportunities during his time as being a slave.
Yeah. That I think had even bigger struggles in seminary just because of all the Latin I just couldn't do.
See, and that's where I think that's where gratitude, if we have the love of God, and it's like, here I am, Lord, at least I'm here. You can use me the way you want to.
Yeah. And
when that happens, then I think you almost it's almost overwhelming emotion to think, wow, I look at, my life will be over quickly. Like Dead Theologian Society, that at least maybe thousands of young people may stay in the faith and may have better marriages, the vocations. When I think of the priests who were inspired who received their calling through DTS, every time that they're forgiving sins and confecting, is that the word? The Eucharist. Is that the right word? Basically so. Make it turn, when the thing consecrate. Yes. That is so huge, and to have had a hand in that, just a hand in that, even though, I'll be gone and forgotten about quickly, and to a degree leading the hidden life now, but at least knowing that there's a contribution, that I'll be a grateful person. I hope and believe on my deathbed to say, thank you, Lord. Wow. Yeah. Wow. And that keeps me inspired.
Yeah. I think it's in Dante's Divine Comedy, in the third one, Paradiso, I hear a lot of people get like really annoyed that like all the saints are just very pompous people in it. And the point is, before you enter heaven, according to the poem, you basically lose not exactly memory of your sin,
Mm.
but really any effect of it. You're suddenly cleansed of it, and then
Yeah.
anything good that you did is suddenly revealed to you in
Wow.
any way. So the saints are there like, no, no, I'm sitting here in God's glory, but look what I did through him and for him. It's like what the priest says, through him, with him, and in
Yes.
him. It is that. And so you read that poem again after sort of understanding that, and you're like, oh wow, this is wonderful because
Yeah.
look at what all these saints did. It's like what you said earlier. You said with DTS you can have someone for the kids to look up to a little bit. And I
Yeah.
remember, I mean, growing up, I love Star Wars. I used to be really into like the superhero stuff as well, and
Mhm.
so I remember like one of the fun things about when I was in seminary was I got to wear robes like a Jedi. I could
Yeah.
like walk around and stuff, and
Yeah.
it was cool. And I remember one day I was serving mass, and there's I think 3 or 4 priests up there, some of the holiest priests I've ever known. But they're saying mass, they're celebrating, and I was just hit with a wave of like, oh my gosh, like not every single power of the earth combined could equal half the power in one of these men because they can forgive
Yes.
sins.
Yes.
It's just
It's phenomenal, isn't it?
it is.
It's really
It's
fun. You're almost
mind-boggling.
lost for words. I mean, it's like
There are no words.
I know. No, I hear you,
Oh,
and I think keeping that burning,
mm,
can carry you all the way, whether you live to be, you know, 25 or 95.
yeah,
And it's so that's interesting, yeah, because you're no longer weighted down by your sins.
yeah,
You really get to live the fact that that they're scattered as far as east is to west.
yeah,
And when you don't have the shame anymore,
yeah.
there must be a glow
Oh,
of no shame.
there must be.
But in this earth, during this time, I know I have shame.
Yeah,
It's like a lot of shame on you, Eddie. And I think that's one of the things every time going to confession, to hear the words of absolution and you feel that kind of shame get lifted
yeah,
for a bit. And it's like, wow, I want to keep that.
yeah,
And I think that's where we tell our young people and older people, self included, by the regular going to confession, you start to want that feeling and
hmm,
you're able to keep that feeling longer. And then when you do something where you should be ashamed of yourself,
yeah,
you don't want to have that hanging on you anymore.
yeah,
So going to confession, it's like that little bit of that foretaste of that cleansing through the purgatorial
hmm.
fires, whatever. And it's like, what a nice feeling.
It is. It
It's
is.
just,
And
you're not,
when
you're,
you've been like
yeah.
doing really well for a while as well, and then you have to like go to confession again after a while of not really needing to.
Yes.
Sort of like the understanding of wow, I can actually see how my conscience has grown
Yes.
and how like 3 years ago this wouldn't have bothered me at all, but this one action is making me feel terrible.
Yes.
It's the
And,
rejuvenation
and now I'm more eager to
to get
get
there.
there
Mm-hmm.
because I've used the analogy. It's like, imagine if there was like, they found the cure for cancers for
Mm.
all of them. And it's something that you could take, and you take it, but at some point it's gonna kind of wear off. But you can go back and get it again, and it's always free.
Yeah,
People
wouldn't
would
even
always go. They would
yeah.
always go. And
They
yet,
probably get it every day just to be safe.
just yes. But having our conscience clean,
Mm-hmm.
having our soul clean, is more important,
Yeah,
and it's free, and it's right there, and the consequences of it
yeah,
are a lot. They're eternal, and it's like, wow, we've got the greatest gift in the world. So we can do better. We can become, like perfect, or in the way that
yeah,
God wants us to be perfect.
yeah.
So I think it's fantastic.
It
Yeah.
is, and I think there's a big fear amongst everyone, but of confession because you have to go tell someone and everything.
Yes.
And we understand the seal of confession. I think like a weird way. We think of it like, oh, he can't. He's like a secret. He can't tell anybody.
Yeah.
I found out later on, like much later in life, he can't even like treat you differently. I remember
Yes.
my spiritual director. I went to him for confession one day, and he's like, "Yeah, well, this might be worth bringing up in direction." And so later that day, we had direction. I was like, "Well, hey, you know, like you said, I should probably bring this up." He's like, "Did I?"
Exactly.
And I'm like, yeah. He's like, huh, okay. I suddenly realized, oh wait, you can't even
No.
act like
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking
He
about.
can't even say, yeah, remember when you were in here
Yeah,
last week?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's phenomenal.
It
That's
is
better than you're
brilliant.
going to get from professional
No,
therapists.
exactly. And it's much more healing.
Isn't that the truth? No, I
Oh.
mean, that's where we have it all. It's funny. I had it like it turned into an argument
Mm.
with my old bandmate of mine, from a
Okay.
rock and roll bandmate of mine, who is not a believer, but I keep telling him, you know, it's here for you. And I try to, and we love each other as old ex-rockers together. But
Mm-hmm.
years ago, we had this conversation, and it was about, I think it was about gay marriage.
Mm.
Yeah, it was actually, when that was first becoming an issue, kind of.
Yeah.
It was quite a while back now. And I remember he kind of got a little bit heated. And he said, "Oh, okay, Eddie." He goes, "So you want the whole world to be Christian, right? You want the whole world to be Christian?" I said, "Actually, yeah, but even more so, I want the whole world to be devout Catholic."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "And it's not out of, I'm not going to force anyone. There's
Mm-hmm.
going to be no broken limbs and hanging someone
Right.
up. I mean, no, but when you love someone, you want what's best for them."
Right.
So I explained, I sincerely believe that what's best for every human being is to know, love, and serve God in the church that he founded,
Right.
in the sacramental life, so that we all go to heaven. I said, so that's to answer your question, because I think he kind of thought I would say, no, I don't. I believe it. But no, I said, no, I tripled down on it. But as I said, and I said, our friendship is still here after all these years. But I appreciated from him
Mm-hmm.
that he knew I was being sincere,
Right.
and he doesn't mock me for it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. So it's a prayer, for my old rock buddies, basically for everybody. It's like, please, Lord, let the opportunity happen somehow. And if the opportunity is there, don't let me cower away or lose courage, or basically, if it's there, let me seize the moment.
Yeah.
And be prudent in doing it. And that's the thing too.
Absolutely.
I think sometimes there are many people in my life that are not practicing Catholics that I wish were, but I try to think, maybe in our conversations, in our humor, in our shared interests, whatever, that they've moved a little closer.
Mm-hmm.
Lord, if I can help, if I can be a genuine witness,
Right.
that maybe they'll think there's something about him that makes him a little more hope-filled and a little less burdened. I want that, that. So being, like I said, is still a very much a sinner and
Right.
unlearned and despised by many. Yeah, please, Lord, let me try to at least not push anyone further away.
Right. Which I think it's not only like the crazy blue-haired people who get offended really easily.
Yeah.
I think they probably get offended by more things more quickly.
Yeah.
But a lot of Catholics get offended really quickly at
Yes.
things that maybe don't necessarily have to. So like I know, when I was in seminary, people make assumptions about you just because of the stereotypes surrounding clergy in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people will make a joke or crack a pun.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people get like offended. And they're like, "Hey, no, like, hey, stop! Like, don't make jokes like that. It's really not accepted." But it's like, hey, you know what? These people don't know, or they don't care.
Right.
And so I would actually enter in with them. I would make some jokes. I would not mocking the clergy, because I would never mock anything sacred.
Right.
But I would sort of slip a jab in here and there, like,
yes.
Like, so you like guys? I'm like, yeah, not you though. And so now it's a joke, and now it's funny. Now we can start talking, and it's no longer like getting annoyed. It's no longer getting hurt.
Yes.
It's like, hey, I recognize you're making a joke.
Yes.
We can laugh at ourselves. We're very funny creatures.
And that's charitable to do that, as opposed to like, I'm so pristine, don't do anything that's going to ruffle my feathers because I'm holy now. It's like, no, we can, in Ireland they call it slagging. You're messing with someone.
Yeah.
You can have a lot of, exactly. Yeah. And you can do that without selling out what you believe, but maybe in some ways they'll think, wow, I guess I can be pretty normal and keep a lot of my interests
Oh,
and stuff.
exactly.
And maybe I want that added thing, which is that hope and eternal
Yeah.
life and all that stuff. So, and that's where I think the prayer for prudence, and I know there are people in my life, it's like, I could go in right now, guns a-blazing and all that stuff, maybe even very sincere, but it may come on way too thick, way too heavy, and they're not ready for that.
Right.
So it's like, let me love them, let them know what I believe in, what I love, what I have, and love them and keep your witness.
Right.
Because it could be, a deathbed conversion is better than no conversion.
Absolutely.
So, boy, yeah, prayer for wisdom and prudence. And there was a great quote I just read from a book, actually the book I authored, Wisdom and Inspiration from the Saints in a Sentence. It's a book that I put together. And it said, which saint was it? Just the other day. But again, I'm showing my lack of. It said, be careful when removing the rust that you don't damage the entire instrument. And I think sometimes if we could be full of the love of God, which is a great thing, but if we're too eager to point out, I got to remove the rust from this person or that person, it could break them and turn them away. Then you've damaged, you know what I mean?
Right. It also might make them feel like there's some sort of project to you, especially if you sort of rush into it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I like dating analogies because I feel like no matter what someone's called to, almost everyone has gone on a date.
Yes.
Or at the very least, if you're homeschooled, you know someone who went on a date.
Yes.
So I was homeschooled. I can make that joke. But it's like I know guys who will basically start to become friends with the girl for the sake of asking her out later.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they're rejected, I know a lot of girls who are like, hey, well, he stopped hanging out with me. He stopped talking to me. Like, it's kind of weird. And I'm like, well, yeah, he was only in it because he wanted to date you. But you had started a friendship. And so it's like...
Interesting. Yeah, very good.
Like, yeah, you don't want to, because now they're much more hurt than they would be if you just went over and said, hey, I think you're cute. Do you want to go get coffee?
Yes.
Because then that's just straightforward. But if you go into it for this other thing and it doesn't sort of pan out, then much more damage will be done.
Very interesting. Yeah. That's good. Wow.
Well, thank you very much. This was
helpful.
Helpful.
Time has flown.
Please do come to DTS when we started this school year. It's for high schoolers. We'll have Deacon Tim, myself, Amanda Mayville here and there, and then as well as the parish's Brandon Bell helping at it.
Now, Jacob, you were doing a wrap up there and I just wrecked it. Okay. I was saying, is it possible, in case anyone wants to know more about Dead Theologians Society, that they can visit our website?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, www.deadtheologianssociety, and that's Dead Theologians with an S, so you have two S's in a row, deadtheologianssociety.com.
Okay. And
there they can find out all about what we do, and if they want to get the book, they can get it right there. But I'm grateful to have this opportunity, and I'm so delighted that there's a chapter of DTS here at this great parish. It's great to meet yourself too.
Oh, likewise. Cheers.